That's the last thing you want is to do. It's actually more hurtful to the culture of finding a way, finding the fix, finding that solution, and then never fixing it. That's just, people are just like, what do we just wasted money. Why did we do this? Most of the problems are right in front of your face. They're very easy to solve. And the people that know how to solve them are the people that are closest to the shop floor. If you spend 70% of the time listening and 30% of the time speaking, you'll know what the gaps are. You'll know what challenges people are having.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Steve Burkle, who I am super thrilled to introduce. And despite looking like he's in his 20s, he somehow has over 3 decades of experience as a hands-on practitioner of process improvement, strategic change, and operational excellence. He has a distinguished track record in operational excellence roles spanning from a start on the shop floor, Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and now Global Director of Operational Excellence. So Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Wonderful. So we like to start this podcast out with a little conversation we call the spark. And what I find is that a lot of people that have made this discipline their career, there's usually like a moment, something where kind of the switch got turned on. I'm curious for you if you remember that moment in your journey.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy because the switch got turned on as I was an operator on the floor, right? So as you said, I've got like over 3 decades, 34 years plus in the pharmaceutical industry. I got really lucky to get in while I was still in school. But while I was in that journey, I identified a lot of problems, right? There was a lot of just issues that happened reoccurring day in and day out. And people kept dealing with that. I was like, why are we just not fixing these things? It was just common sense, right? It's not like it was, I've never even heard of lean back in like 1991, right? So, this is, I was very young and I was a natural problem solver. So that kind of took hold. And as I started to just solve problems every day, I became really good at it. And then started teaching others how to solve those problems as well. So that's kind of got me started in the beginning.
What was that first company that you were working at?
That was Mylan Pharmaceuticals, great company to work for. They are now Viatris, owned by Pfizer.
And what kind of work were you doing there?
Oh, I spent almost 29 years there. So I did everything from a packaging operator and it was an oral solid dose manufacturing facility, 1.1 million square feet in Morgantown, West Virginia. So yeah, I was an manufacturing operator on the floor, did in the granulation department, compaction, blending, fluid bed, dryers, cleaning, got into tablet press and ran tablets and capsules and just about every process there in my early years until I got my first leadership position when I was 25 years old in the tablet press or compression department.
Did that company have a formal like lean or continuous improvement program?
It did not. At that time that, again, in the life sciences, division, you just didn't really hear about that, right? I mean, it was out there, but more in the automotive industry. Again, it was just the expectation was you just fixed your own problems. I mean, and again, it was just kind of the way you worked, which is really the way we should be looking at continuous improvement every day anyway, right? It really isn't a department, but probably after about, 10 years, probably, we actually got our first operational excellence department, which made up several or a couple anyway, black belts, master black belts. And that's where it started.
How did the company at that time decided to set up an operational excellence department, was that somebody from inside the company that got a new title, or was that somebody from outside the company that you guys brought in?
They were outside the company. I believe they were GE is where they had worked. GE,
Yeah,
totally
GE's had a lot of spawn from GE, processes, I guess, right? GE
yeah.
people have ended up in a lot of different organizations. Do you recall what your first introduction was to, like, formal lean training?
It's kinda funny that you said that because the wild part about it is that I had been doing continuous improvement, right? Again, not even knowing I was doing continuous improvement. I just, again, it was the way we worked. Our master black belt that, which was a senior director there of operational excellence, he offered me a position, and at first I turned it down. And when I turned a position, he's like, why do you not want, why wouldn't you wanna come over to the department? And I'm like, "Well, you know, I already, I kind of like what I'm doing. I like being in operations, it's kind of controlled chaos, if that makes any sense, right? You liked kind of being reacting, but again, being on top of your game and you kind of liked being, kind of winning, right? If you fix something, you were the hero of the day, right? So, you kind of get into that groove where you like it. But he's like, "You're so good at fixing everything in this one department. Why wouldn't you wanna do that everywhere?" So, at the time, the general manager was like, "Hey, go offer him some money, take him out to lunch." So, it took some influence to get me to, wanna go on board, but as I started talking to him, he was he just kinda wanted a tour. He's like, "Tell me what you do. Let's walk around." And I started telling him about all the things. He's like, "That's leader standard work." That's, so he started going through all the tools. He's like, "You're doing a lot of this stuff already. You already know it. You just didn't know the name of it, right? It actually, all these things you're doing have a name," which was, I thought was pretty cool because I'm like, okay, I thought this was just common sense and I thought I designed it. You think you came up with these things, but they've been around forever. So it was
That's
kind
one
of,
thing I think is so interesting about this discipline, how there's this idea of truth. Like when you hear truth, it just makes sense. A lot of the stuff in this discipline, like the tools that you just mentioned, whether it's leader standard work or so many others, you hear about them, you're like, well, yeah, of course that makes sense. Why wouldn't you do it that way? Right.
yeah,
But
exactly.
a lot of people, we all have to learn everything that we learn in some sort of way. And, I think that's just so interesting how people go about learning this stuff because it's so often that we forget what it's like not to know the things that we know. When you think about some of those tools that you've learned or some of those milestones along your journey and now you're more senior, how do you approach training somebody, somebody newer? Are there certain things that you try to run them through experiences, training that you try to get them involved with?
Sure, but the biggest thing to me, it's not so much about the tools, right? It's more about listening to people, understanding the challenges that the people are going through. If you spend 70% of the time listening and 30% of the time speaking, you'll know what the gaps are. You'll know what challenges people are having and you'll just naturally start to work with them to solve problems, right? And again, it's working. You're not the one solving the problems. The people solve the problems, right? You're there just to offer your experience and methodology and the tools. But again, it's not about the tools. It's about just being out there. It's more of a mindset and a culture.
Now, is that something that changed for you when you went from being in operations to be in more of a facilitating role of
Yeah,
operational excellence? What was
absolutely.
that like? Was that hard for you?
It was very difficult, because, again, you wanna be the hero, right? So you wanna be the one fixing everything, but I found out really quick that doing operational excellence or continuous improvement on people doesn't work very well, right? So people, just it might be the greatest idea in the world, but if they weren't involved or somehow, engaged in the process, they don't wanna adopt it, right? Which makes sense, right? They wanna be part of the solution. Um and the best thing to do is allow them to come up with the solution, facilitate, ask the right questions, challenge people, but let them solve the problem. Because if they're part of solving the problem or the ones that solve the problem, they adopt it right away, right? Because again, it's theirs, they own it. And those are the projects that typically are sustainable rather than a project that you forced on someone.
In this discipline, we talk a lot about projects, and this word project is one of those that's so generic. Like everybody has conception of what a project is. In this world of operational excellence, how would you, if you say, how do you introduce the concept of project and how do you probe for like what a good project would be?
Yeah. So, obviously we use the Hoshin planning methodology, right? So, again, we build with the teams to understand what those gaps are. So we sit down with leadership at the top levels to understand what are their gaps and challenges first, right? There's where we typically start to build out that idea hopper or, what are the big challenges? Again, some of these projects, so-called projects or initiatives come from the shop floor. Some of them are just do it's. Some of them are easy wins, quick wins, right? That only take a couple people to solve. And then some may take 5 to 7 cross-functional teams, or even larger teams that are go across sites to solve the problems that might be a transformational type change, right? So I look at it kind of like that. But again, I let the sites come up with their own initiatives and projects, and then we just help them solve those problems.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit to when you were an operator, and there was a mindset I think that you had to be successful, and you described it as like I just saw stuff, I just saw problems and I fixed them, and I just thought that's what everybody did. I mean, now having a little bit more experience and probably having employees at all different levels, you probably realize that that's not necessarily a natural state for everybody. That desire to solve problems. Is there something that you think how do some individuals have that and how do some not? What's the difference there? How do you spot that?
Well, some people are so used to just reacting, right? That they're used to putting band-aids on things, right? It's easy. It's easy to just, you know what, let's just get through the day. Let's put a quick band-aid on it and go on, right? Again, it depends on pressures, from pressures from above sometimes to get a certain amount of production out or whatnot. And again, sometimes it's kind of like that old, you know, you've probably seen the images of a caveman pushing a wheelbarrow with square, wheels, and the guy, holding the round wheel and say, "Hey, I got a better way," and he's like, "I don't have time to improve." So, you know, that's a lot of the pressures. Is it's all about needing the need for change. They know they need have the need for change, but they don't feel that they have the time to change, and it has to start from the top has to be engaged and have the buy-in to, again, empower the people to allow them to make change when it's necessary, right? And that's where a lot of it's got to come from. It starts at the top. If you have the right buy-in and empowerment from the leaders, the people, I have had nothing but good luck with the folks on the shop floor. They want to change and they're all about it. It's just you've got to empower them to allow them to be able to do it.
Have you been involved in a company? I mean, it sounds like perhaps you were in that first one where you went from not having an operational excellence department to having an operational excellence department and having to explain what this new department is going to do.
Yeah, because a lot of people in the beginning stages of my career in operational excellence, a lot of people think that operational excellence is a job, right? That's your job. It's your job to fix things. It's your job to do continuous improvement, right? But then they don't really want it, and they kind of want you to kind of stay out of their lane. Well, go do that somewhere else, or you don't get a lot. You're kind of pushing your way into those companies, right? Once people see that you're there to help them, you're helping them solve problems and you get some quick wins, you start to get people coming to you and asking for help, right? So there's less pushing your way in. That does not work. It's always better when you've got a little bit of a burning platform and people ask for assistance or, you know, we don't know how to solve this problem, but we know it's a problem. Can you help us with this? Again, early in the career at Mylan, we had that challenge. Again, we didn't have a department. We didn't really understand that, but we started to learn that over time, right? Again, we were early in the like I said, late 90s by that time, early 2000s, and were starting to just during that journey. It takes a little bit of time to get your feet underneath of you through that process. But yeah, when I switched over to now again, after several years, we got pretty good at it over at Mylan, and we were really making really good strides on progress. And then I went over to Thermo Fisher, and Thermo Fisher has a fantastic business system process, and it was just natural to them. Um, again, it's really embedded into the culture over there. So will say that it was definitely easy, and it got to the point where you were never looking for work. I'll just put it that way. There was always every day, there was again, every day people would come to you and say, "Hey, I have this issue, I have this problem." And part of the model that we ran at the business system is you developed people, right? So we developed our people or developed the organization of problem solvers. You have to build that army, especially when you have small teams like we have today. We have a couple people, couple operational excellence people with the sites that are SMEs, but the people become operational excellence, right? So it's just like everybody's job is safety and quality, where everybody's job is improving as well as continuous improvement. So, yeah, it's developing the organization of problem solvers. That army of problem solvers is what will take you to the next level.
I love that. And again, I've said this before, this exact same phrase on this podcast, but I've never met a company that couldn't use more big problem solvers. Like just people that can solve problems, do it in a well-structured way, do it in a way that is I guess politically correct for the organization, because you can push too hard, you can push not hard enough. Like every organization is a little bit different in how you got to get change to happen. Steve, one thing I like to do on this podcast is explain some of the acronyms that we throw out, because sometimes in any discipline, there's always like this jargon, right? You used a couple of terms: SME, subject matter expert. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
The other one, you mentioned a good one that I think deserves a little bit of an explanation. Could you describe the burning platform analogy?
yeah. Sure. Hopefully, I can explain this, right to you guys. But the burning platform is when a company or a department has an actual problem, like a big problem, and they need to solve it, and it could cause it could be impactful to the business from a revenue or a financial way, right, or from a quality aspect that it is impactful enough that they know they need help, right? When a company's doing extremely well and making money hand over fist, they're not in the burning platform, right? They're like, why do I need to improve? Right? I'm already making money. I don't need to make more money. I already make plenty of money. But when you're having challenges, people understand that, you know what, if I don't get some help, we're going to be in real trouble here. So that's kind of the burning platform in my eyes and what I've been taught.
That's great. Thanks for explaining that. You mentioned that your journey spans a number of decades, and when you first were in the company that you were at, that lean wasn't really a thing, and now it is more. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that these lean concepts moving into more and more disciplines within the organizations, or even in.
Yeah, absolutely. The life science industry has really grown from an operational excellence standpoint. Pretty much most of the key players in the industry today all have a business system or some production system that they're running. And there are a lot of great ones out there. In the end, it's all the same stuff, right? It's how you model that to make your company successful. And again, the ones that do it the best are the ones that believe in it. It's a mindset and a culture, right? It's not a tool. Don't use it as a tool. Don't go out there just trying to hire green belts and black belts and think you're going to solve all your problems, right? Because the majority of your problems are low hanging fruit, right? And what I mean by that is that most of the problems are right in front of your face. They're very easy to solve. And the people that know how to solve them are the people that are closest to the shop floor. It's not the people sitting at the desks or the black belts. Yeah, they're going to help you with the tools and the methodologies and Lean Six Sigma and all the different again methodologies out there. But in the end, the people that do the job every day are the ones that have these challenges. They've seen these problems over and over and over, and they want to fix it more than anybody because they get tired of dealing with the problem, and it keeps them up at night, right? So engage your people. That's the one key thing I can say is engage your people and empower them to solve their own problems and do it with operational excellence. Again, as a team. And that's the best way. Kaizen is one of the best tools out there. Kaizen means good change, right? Change in a way that you're going to continuously improve.
I want to drill into this organization structure here for just a minute. If somebody were to say, "Hey, my company doesn't have an operational excellence department, maybe we should," how would you describe the function of that operational excellence department or those jobs?
again, that one, you just don't obviously you have to build that, right? And it takes years to become to create a model that runs perfectly, right? Or to create that business system. It's typically about it's a minimum of a 5-year journey to get to you're actually running it in an excellent standpoint, right? So everybody's foundational in the beginning. And there's a maturity curve that you have to get through. But start small. Start with small wins because the small wins are what pulls the people in, the people that want as soon as they start to see change in a good way and it's making their life easier, right? They're more apt to jump on the bandwagon and they're like, "Hey, I see that these guys here or this department's here to help me." Right? Not give me more work because that's OpEx has in the past, and I've seen this, is it can get a bad name or has been given a bad name by if it's done incorrectly. And when I say that is if you go and give people more work and you walk away from it and you're not really solving the problem, you're just adding more work to them, that's when it gets a bad name. When you're there to help them solve problems and you actually are part of that work and you actually embrace that with them, they adopt it very quickly. And again, they see you as you're there to help them instead of you're there to give them more work, right? You don't want to
And
be that department.
in your role, are you working primarily at one site or do you move
Yeah.
between multiple sites?
Yeah, I work across multiple sites.
Okay, so if you call up somebody in your organization, be like, "Hey, Steve's coming to town, want to meet with you." Is there like a set of questions or a way you approach it so that it doesn't feel like, "Oh, Steve's coming to give me more work," but you're there to help them solve problems? Do you have any like a lead-in set of questions or the way you approach that meeting?
No, a lot of it, we already have OpEx at all the sites right now. So we already have an operational excellence lead and a specialist at the sites at a minimum. And those folks, they already understand what they're there to do, right? I think they see me as, just another set of hands to come help,
Yeah.
right? The one thing that we like to do is Gemba walk, right? And again, go there with a purpose, go see, ask questions and show respect, right? You have to that's the biggest piece. Again, Gemba's not an audit, right? That's the main point is you've got to push that. Let them know you're coming. Let them know what's the purpose or the topic you're going to understand. You're there to go learn, right? So when people know you're on a Gemba walk and they know the true purpose of it, they come to you. If you're there to audit, they're going to go the other direction. Right, but if they know you're there to help them solve problems, they come to you and say, "Hey, I have this roadblock or I have this barrier that's getting in my way every day. What can we do? Is there something we can do about that?" Right? And you'll have people come to you like crazy. And again, I think we've built those relationships pretty good at KBI that we don't have that people running away from. So
That's
people know what operational excellence is. The one thing we're trying to do is get away from really the word operational excellence and get into what's a KBI business system. So we're
good.
launching our business system it is about the way we work, right? Is
Yeah.
that great running the daily management of of the tiered accountability meetings, the Gemba walks, again, the layered process audits, process confirmation, that type of thing. And building that in through our leader standard work in the way we do things every day.
Yeah, with of course, operational excellence has this intention of making things better over time and this continuous improvement thread. And there's a lot of tools in there. And you kind of touched on the language part of it and calling it the KBI. What did you call it? The KBI,
Business.
the business system. Yeah,
Yeah,
like the way we do things around here at KBI. I think Toyota called it like the Toyota way, or I've seen
yeah,
a lot of
Toyota
companies will
production
say
system,
that.
most people, yeah, the production system is typically the operations, the production part of the floor. The difference between a business system and production system is the business system touches every entity. It touches every business unit across the company. So that could be HR, it could be facilities and engineering or the warehouse. It doesn't have to be completely operations driven, right? It can be again, the Gemba could be at somebody's desk if that's what they do. If that's
Yeah.
their floor, right?
I find that so interesting that there are these disciplines where Toyota does it this way, and that's probably a great way of doing it. But one thing I always find so interesting is that every company is unique in their own little ways. Like you can never look at the way somebody else did it and say that's the right way to do it. You could say that's another way to do it, but there's always like a right way to do it here at our company, at your company. And I think that's the interesting part of this journey is that you can never really just rubber stamp everything. It has to evolve, kind of organically. I'm curious with that idea, you were touching on some things that I would refer to as behavior patterns or processes. There's some that you guys are doing maybe consistently. What are some of those behavior patterns that are part of your current set of rituals in operational excellence that are winning, that are working well for you that you might recommend for others?
Yeah, definitely. Like I've said, I spoke to you about the daily management system, right? And again, it's really a great leadership tool, right? Or not necessarily, or really, it's a toolbox of tools, right? So you've got, again, it's knowing what are your rocks per se, right? If you've ever heard of rocks, pebbles, sand, right? What are the main things that you need to work on in a day? Right? And then what are the pebbles? What are the things you can fill in the gaps when you're not doing those big major activities that you need to get done every single day. And then there again, the sand, the noise that just gets in the way, right? That's again part of that daily management system is having a good leader standard work program. And that starts at the very top of the organization. There has to be linkage between every single layer within your organization and then feedback loops, communication loops that we use through one-on-ones between our managers and our subordinates. So those are through our one-on-one discussions as you talk about what went well through the week. What challenges did you run into? Where can I help? How can I help break down barriers for you? Again, part of that comes out of Gemba walks. So, right, as we're Gemba walking the floors as leaders down through clear to the front line teams, we're understanding, again, what are people's challenges? What are the things, the problems that they're seeing every day that are, how can we help them? Um, Taking those actions that come out of those and bringing them into the tier huddles or the huddle boards, right? And again, that's a really great communication tool. 15 minutes a day, right? At each tier level, again, depending on the level of the organization you're in. We have a tier one, which is the frontline operators and supervisors, specialists on the floor, to our tier twos, which is more of that manager value stream level, right? The manager of all the departments come together and all that information feeds up to the next level. And then again, your tier three, which is our SLT level. And again, more of the site level view, right? And if there's a problem that somebody can't solve at that first tier, it escalates to the next tier. And if they can't solve the problem, it escalates again. And then there's that feedback of once it's escalated, what did they do to solve the problem? That information and communication goes back down to where it originally came from so that we close that communication loop. Those are all great tools of the toolbox of the daily management system. And then again, we throw visual management in there as well, right? Is just, again, whether that's this workplace organization, making sure you're inspection ready at all times. And then again, Kanban, systems and such to make sure you have material readiness at all times for your production shop floor.
You mentioned the leader standard work. Sometimes we abbreviate that as LSW around here, leader standard work. Could you explain, just like for somebody that might not know what that is, just tell us what leader standard
Yeah.
work is?
Yeah, so leader standard work, the way we use it is, we have daily activities that need to be done. And again, I have it, all my entire team has it. Everybody in the organization, we're rolling this out to where everybody uses it, clear up to our COO of the company, right? Um, and so you have daily activities that may need to be done. And again, those are your rocks. Those are the things that you must do every day to make sure that the business runs properly. Then you have weekly activities or monthly activities or quarterly activities. It's really easy. You basically mark those green or red, whether you completed them or not. And at the end of the week, you meet with your manager and you kind of talk about number one, what are the things that you saw? There was the challenges that you had throughout the week, but what got in the way? What kept you from completing your leader standard work, right? Because there may be, again, those rocks that are those expectations from your manager. If there may be a couple that really, you weren't able to complete because of some unforeseen circumstances, right? their job is to break down that barrier. Okay. What was it that got in your way? And their job is to say, well, it could be, well, I had all these meetings or I had this and that to do, right? And or somebody wanted me to do it. But their job is to find out, should you even have needed to go to those meetings? Or do if that's not something you do, it's their job to take that away from you, right? So that you're still able to do the things that they expect you to do every day. But that's gonna happen. It's not, it doesn't always happen, but we try to target 90% or higher to hit our leader standard work. Again, some of that's got some pebbles in it, right? But again, it's the important things, right? It's the things that are gonna keep your business running smoothly, and without distraction.
Yeah, I tend to think of the leader standard work activities kind of around two behavior patterns, I'll call them. One of them is like the audit of the standard work, right? Let's say you're my boss and we meet together and you say, hey, how you doing? I'm like, man, I'm totally stressed out. I got this, and this. And you're like, okay, let's talk through. Let's make a list of all the stuff you're doing. And I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. And you're like, well, yeah, like you got some stuff on there you probably shouldn't be doing. Why are you doing all that? Like, we can use that to like plan the work. And then once we have that agreement of like, this is the job that I'm supposed to do, then you can check in and say, hey, did you do those 6 things that you were supposed to do this week? And I can say, yep, 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 I got them all done.
Yeah. And
And
I'm glad yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
it's great.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is a lot of people were like, "Well, this is just something else I gotta do," right? But it's there to help you because
Yeah.
it's there to help you identify, am I really working on the right things, right? And it's to show your manager, these are all the things that I'm expected to do, but you know what? There's really not enough time to do it. Do we need extra resources to help? Should these activities go to somebody else, right? And maybe it shouldn't be your job to do these things. So it's actually helps both sides. It helps the manager understand what they're actually doing, what's capable to do in the time frame that they're there at work. And again, what's getting in the way? What are the things that really they're missing because they're doing these other activities that really just aren't that important?
You know what's one thing I really like about the standard work, like going through the audit on a regular basis, is if you're somebody who's busy and you got a long task list and you're kind of permanently living in this state of like there's always 1,000 things to do. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you've actually done everything on your standard work list and you got done early, like you kind of have this stress that lives with you. Like, I feel like there's something else I should be doing. But
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
have that standard work checklist, it's almost like, hey, this is the stuff that when I had a clear head, I said, this is the job. I need to do these things. And hey, we got these things done. Like we can give ourselves permission to say, good job today. And there's something valuable about that part of work, and not
yeah.
constantly feeling overwhelmed, but finding a chance to feel successful.
Yeah. Every now and then that happens. It doesn't happen that much for me, but it is a great feeling when you get it all done because 'cause you're like, it's a feeling of accomplishment, right? But yeah, it's again, it's just it's an awesome tool, and again, just that's what it is. It's a tool, and that's all it is. And it's not really about the tool as much as it is the dialogue with the conversation you have with your manager. That's the beauty of the tool is that you use it for the conversation because you're taking notes on your leader standard work, right? You're observing. We also have what we have like a SWOT analysis on our leader standard work as well. So we look at not only things that are gaps or potential opportunities, but what are some of the great things that our team is doing, right? What are the things that they do really well that we could maybe share some best practices across the network or other departments, right? To showcase that stuff. We look at the opportunities, we look at our weaknesses and our threats. Hey, we lost a couple employees through attrition or something, and it's going to impacting us from again. Those are things that you observe and you identify and again take back to your manager to say, hey, I need to escalate this, that we need to hire these people back so that we can make sure that we're not slipping. So again, it's a great tool for all of that stuff.
That's great. Yeah, I think you touched on another important part of the role or the function of the department. It usually lands in that operational excellence is the sharing of best practices so that those great ideas and improvements that are made in one area, again, because a lot of us, if we're just in operations, just focused on ourselves, we don't realize how amazing that thing is that we're doing. You see people with outlier performance, and it usually requires somebody who's got a little bit broader perspective on things to recognize that great performance. And in a bigger company, you want to try to share as much of that as you can and
Absolutely,
spread
yeah.
that.
Yeah, because they're again, you we get it's such a busy, life science is just busy anyway, but the more busy you are, you can get to the point where the same people are working on the same projects at the same site, right? Not let alone other sites across the network, right? So, you wanna be able to share those things, and again, when you share the best practice, it's like, instead of me going out there and recreating the wheel, I can literally just hand you what we did to fix it. And most of the time, you may have to tweak it a little bit. Most of the time, it fits nicely into your program. And we've done that several times at KBI.
It's interesting. I'm curious if along the lines of, is there a project or, something in your history experience that you were involved with that went particularly well, something that, had a really big impact that it comes to mind?
Probably this one here is sound as simple as it is. It probably had one of the biggest impacts I've seen, especially at one company, and it was the 5S rolling out a 5S program. So a lot of people think of 5S as just housekeeping, right? But it's workplace organization, right? So you want to make sure that again, just going through the 5S's, right, is sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And again, some companies use 6S's for safety, but safety is embedded in the entire process, right? If you have a really good 5S program, you have a safe workspace. But rolling out that program really made our site, and not only the site, because this spread across the entire organization, that it created an inspection ready state. So everybody hates that we got a regulatory auditor that's coming to inspect you, right? And there's a lot of them out there, especially when you're a global company and you're selling across the nation, you're inspected by everyone. Who doesn't want an inspection ready site at all times when the regulatory agency can knock on a door and say, "Hey, we're here unexpectedly," and you can say, "Come on in, we're ready for you," right? There's no trying to prepare or prep for any audit because the place looks fantastic. And that's what we got to. We were at that level where the site was beautiful. It just you could eat off the floor, no matter where, right? Whether that was not even in the clean rooms, like in the normal walking gray space, or we called them like black zones where people would walk with shoes on, right? But the area was absolutely spotless. Things were exactly where they needed to be. It was very organized, a place for everything in its place. You knew when something was missing. We literally saved 14,000. We liberated, I call it liberated rather than saved, right? We liberated 14,000 labor hours in our first year through utilizing FAS. We went from every week cleaning, over hundreds of hours of cleaning to zero through literally implementing tests and putting first in, first out systems in place. Again, a little visual management goes a long way because we kept re-cleaning. There was no organization. So people would clean a piece of equipment and they'd push it into the spot. And guess what? That person would take the one it was just last cleaned. Well, these other 10 behind it we're running out of their 30-day hold time. So when it came down to it and they got to those pieces of equipment, they had to be re-cleaned. They had to be disassembled. So there was just a lot of rework that happened because of that. We totally eliminated that within the first couple months of literally finalizing the 5S of just one room. We fixed that problem. It was
Wow.
amazing.
How did that effort start out? Did it start out in like a local area, or was it one that you said, "Hey, we're gonna do this everywhere"?
It did start off in a local area. It started off in a storeroom that 3 departments owned. And you know how when 3 departments own something, nobody owns it, right? So, it's just like, well, everybody it's kind of a catch-all. So everybody, kinda just pushes all their stuff in there. And like I said, it came out of an observation. And from that observation, it went viral, literally. Like, it was amazing of how good the area looked that it was just like, how soon can you do this with everything? Right? So, and again, it wasn't like one person that did it. It was a group. It was all 3 departments came together and we did it together.
That's awesome.
And it involved everyone down to the operators on the shop floor. And again, their ideas, and not only that, the really great part about it is once they adopted it, they continue use CI. They continually improved their process. They started off with like these carts, and they're like, you know what? It'd be great if we added handles to these carts because I don't have to bend over, so it's more ergonomic. So right there goes, improvement in safety. So there was less back injuries. So there was just all these continuous improvement activities that people just took ownership of it. And honestly, that was the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest projects. Again, 1.1 million square feet. That's a lot, 5-story building. So it was a huge impact. And again, it really, really looked fantastic.
Speaking of impact, the name of the podcast is KPI Fireside, so we have to talk a little bit about KPIs. You mentioned one, you called it liberated hours. I'm curious if you have a few metrics, key performance indicators that have worked well for you, or you might recommend that people have as part of their program to be able to objectively measure how they're doing. Are there some of these that you recommend or you've had success with?
Yeah, we have many. We have a lot of KPIs. What I would say, I don't wanna say that there's one specific KPI that's better than another, right? The Measure What Matters, and that's actually a great book, just so you're aware.
There
It's a fantastic book, but it's not about the KPI, it's about
That's the
that.
one.
Yeah, I've got the same book. That's what it is. Measure what matters to you. If it doesn't if you can't take action on the KPI, don't measure it. If it's not going to impact you in some way, if you're always some KPI, this department over here has a lot of issues with this one thing. If they want to measure it, fantastic. But if this other department is having great success and doesn't, why would they measure something that's always green
Mm.
or there's no way to improve that? Again, measure what matters to the area, right? But again, make it meaningful, right? And making it actionable. And if you can't make the KPI have action, you shouldn't be measuring it at that level.
Can you give us an example of a KPI that would be like actionable versus not actionable?
I'll just give you an example of like, say, OSHA recordable rate at like a frontline team, right? That's more of a lagging metric, right? So it's a metric that has, you know, it may be something that's recorded once a month, right? You wanna record something that's more of a leading metric or a leading KPI that is something that would have influence or enables the OSHA recordable rate,
So
right?
what's
So
something that you might measure safety related at the first level instead of incident
yeah,
rate?
that's a great question. So, like, to me, a good leading indicator for that would be to look for, anything that could be potential risk, right? Look for safety risks. So, something that could be a trip hazard or
Okay.
some type of, that's what we call it as like safety opportunities. So, what
Oh,
type of, we would maybe track, did you guys see a safety opportunity in the last 24 hours? And then you take action on that, right? Because if I start to see, yeah, there's a lot of trip hazards or I'm seeing cables on the floor or something that could cause me to trip, you know, that would cause me to have a potential, OSHA recordable, right? If
yeah,
I
I love
don't
that.
fix the problem, or take action on it, the likelihood of that happening is pretty high, right? But I
Yeah.
can't necessarily fix the output of having an OSHA recordable, right? But I can fix not having things on the floor that are trip hazards,
I
right?
think
So, yeah,
I think that's such an interesting example of how the objective of sure, it's simple to say we want to have a safe work environment and you could measure that, OSHA could measure that, your insurance could measure that, whatever, based on your recordable rate, how many incidents you have based on, number of hours or something. But to be able to take that and turn that into something that can be useful and helpful at the front line, what did you call it? Safety opportunities?
observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are opportunities. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, safety opportunity. And again, you got to look at, again, it becomes harder the more safe a site is, right? The more, again, when you have FS in place, a really good 5S program, you find less and less opportunities, right? But again, there's always something, right? Somebody accidentally spilled water and didn't clean it up. There's opportunities sometimes. And again, those actions that you take start to become the mindset and the culture. People start to see those things and things start to stick out to them, right?
Yeah.
But when you see all kinds of trip hazards or you see all kinds of risks all the time, it kind of becomes the norm and you gloss over it. You don't no longer see the opportunities because you've ignored them for so long. Again, it goes back to mindset and mindset and behaviors, which will drive the culture, right? So you need to start to try to drive a culture of safety culture around identifying these issues and being, again, take action. Because if it's okay if I identify them, but if I don't take action, they're still going to be there tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So the action's the most important part of it.
I'm a big fan of just a simple methodology I'll call the daily number, which, everybody has like a number. And I like, a good daily number is different for every company, but I like to, kind of say a good daily number points you in the direction of the work to be done. Like if I had a teenager and I said, "Hey, how many garbage cans do you need to take out to the curb today?" It's either zero, 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 or two, right? Like
Yeah.
two. I got two things to do today. And I think like safety opportunities is a great one. I think that's an interesting part of a leader's job, whether you say leader or manager, but how many people do you think in companies are reporting, recording, analyzing numbers, and they really don't know why they're doing it? Like, I'm reporting this because somebody did it before me. I'm recording this because I think somebody cares about it. I think that's an interesting observation on like how a leader should be thinking. Like, what are the behaviors that measuring these metrics are encouraging?
You're right about that. I've seen that so many times where it's a KPI that's been in place for years, right? And it's like, okay, but when you look at the board, it's always green. Why is it always green? Right? So you got to ask yourself, do you change the way you're measuring it, or do
Mhm.
you change the KPI? Maybe you make the measurement stricter so that you want to be able to say it's, when I say more strict, right? You want to make it to where it's not necessarily per easy to do, right? But you want to make it challenging. You don't want to make it impossible so where you're always red, because how do you action something that's red every single day, right? You want to
Yeah.
make it to where it's meaningful, actionable, but again, a KPI that you can actually fix or improve over time. Go ahead.
You touched on what I would think of as like operating metrics, and every business and every function, every department has a lot of operating metrics and they have to, shift their focus. Are there some metrics that in your OpEx department you think these are important ones to share how the OpEx department or function is doing across the organization? There's some there?
Yeah, there's a couple that we track, but yeah, I agree that OpEx also has their own tier boards, right? We look at a couple different ones, right? So we also look at like a behavior counter, right? Like how many Gembas are we going on? How many Kaizens or workshops are we doing with our teams? But we also measure maturity at the sites,
Mhm.
right? We measure what we call a health and maturity assessment. If you've ever heard of the Shingo, um, um, assessment, we use a very similar tool that measures like kind of four components within a system and a lean system, right? From even down to the people. So that's a measurement for us to say, okay, we're at a bronze level or we're at a foundational level and we want to get to a silver level. What are the actions that we have to take? So we'll actually take actions, and again, this isn't OpEx necessarily doing it, but the plan is built from OpEx with the leadership teams together cohesively, right? But it's still something we measure at the site level. So again, you want to get to where you're at a foundational to cleared to a mastering or a maturing level, right? Over time. That's something that's measured from us. We measure so many other things. But again, the big one is around
So
behaviors and
some
workshops and such.
lead measures. Do you guys measure savings, cost savings, hard savings versus soft
Absolutely.
savings, direct versus indirect?
Yeah, we do. We measure that across the site. It's not really, we call it value capture savings, but it's not necessarily OpEx savings, right? OpEx didn't, the department didn't save the
Yeah.
money, but the site or the company saved the money. And that's looked at it like a type 1 or a type 2 type of savings. So whether that was hard savings where it hits the P&L, right? So it actually drove throughput to give you extra revenue, or it was a cost avoidance type of a metric where I didn't have to purchase or hire these people because I was able to improve the process, right? So it may not necessarily be hard savings, but it saved the company money from avoiding cost, basically. So we save, again, we really look at soft savings, which is again anything from a safety perspective, again, reducing risk at sites, right? From a soft savings to a cost avoidance savings into a hard savings. And we give ourselves basically targets based off our projected revenue for the year.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all in one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So, whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com. So you guys, this is a super juicy, interesting topic for a lot of our people. So first of all, the question of whether to measure hard savings or not. Some people in their CI function don't measure hard savings. Sounds like you're a fan of measuring it with some caveats. Are you
For
willing
sure.
to share the percent of total costs or percent of revenue that you guys target on a reoccurring basis for savings
Yeah,
to
we
target?
typically target about 15. We take a revenue target of our revenue, multiply that by 1.15. Uh, yeah,
1.15?
yep,
So like
yep.
one point, yeah, 1.15%. Um, That's I mean, that's definitely in line with what we hear. I hear a lot of times between 1% and 3%. If it's your first year setting up a CI program, maybe you can find a lot more savings. But if you've had a program in place sustained for a while, 1% to 3% is a pretty reasonable target.
Exactly, and we have ramped that up, right? So we look at where's the site at, right? If they're foundational, it's
Hmm.
like a 1%, 1 to 2%, right? But we also look at that from a savings of that 1.15 is broken down by, or that 15%, right? Is basically broken down by savings type, right? So how much hard savings? So there's typically about a 2 to 3% hard savings, 1 to 2%, 3% of cost avoidance, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
It's more difficult to get hard savings because there's only a few ways to do it, right? You have to produce more than you did before. So you're producing more with less. And in the end, that's going to be your outcome, right? So if I produced an extra 2 or 3 batches a year with the same amount of resources, and I just did it in a more optimized way, yeah, that would be hard savings, right? It would be what I didn't project to hit those extra 3 batches, but I did, and I was able to sell them, right? They just didn't sit in a queue and then expire and was garbage anyway, right? Which is one of be one of the wastes, 8 wastes, but we actually produced it and we're able to sell it, right? So that would be a hard savings. There's also other hard savings, but I don't like to tie it back to continuous improvement in any way because it isn't continuous improvement, and that's reducing headcount.
Yeah.
So where you can get some hard savings from that standpoint is if you were projecting to add additional bodies, an additional 5%, 10% to a site, but I was able to optimize and not hire those people that were budgeted for. That would be also hard savings.
I have a question about capacity utilization, percent of cast capacity utilization. You've been in the industry for a long time. I'm assuming that at some point in your career, maybe you had a product that you literally could sell everything you could make.
Absolutely.
Is there a time where you've been in a situation where capacity was at 100% plus and you were just madly trying to figure out how to make more of it? Constrained?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially when you have a blockbuster drug or, you have something that you have exclusivity on. You definitely want to build produce as much as you can, right? And again, not mass produce, but produce in a way that you have really good yields, that you are producing right the first time, and it's going to get out on the market and actually help patients, not, not hurt someone, right? So yeah, absolutely. But what you got to do from a capacity standpoint is you got to look at what are the wastes within the process, right? And eliminate those. This is where I preach the most is you don't speed up people, you speed up processes, right? If you try to speed up the people, you will make mistakes and cause deviations, which are very, very costly to a company. Typically, you end up losing product in the interim. So the best thing to do is to look at the process itself, because the process is typically, again, if you need to increase throughput, right? Then you look at what are all that you sit down with the team and you identify what are all the waste within the process. How can we streamline the process to make it the process faster or more optimized, and have that cycle time shorter time, right? With the people moving in the same pace that they were before, right? Very consistent way of working. Again, you do not want them rushing, because that when they're rushing, they're going to forget something, right? So that's where standard work comes in, with really good standard work practices for them to follow. And then as long as they're following that, again, it's not about speeding up the people. It's just you'll win every time if you just speed up the process.
And it's never ceases to amaze me, companies at all sizes and scales, even the ones that you think are the best of the best, how the trained eye people close to the process can find waste, waiting for,
Absolutely.
searching for, looking for versions of waste. It never ceases to amaze me how infinite that well is.
Yeah, it's that's the greatest thing about the Kaizen events, right? So that's one of my favorite tools in the toolbox, right? Is to, when we know there's a problem, let's get a good 5 to 7 cross-functional team members together, and let's process map it, right? Let's go through
Yeah.
and look at what's that current state actually look like, because it doesn't always look like what you think it looks like. It's always a mess, right? There's always a lot of caveats that slow that process down. You didn't have material on time. There was a delay here. You had a defect here. You had a machine breakdown, right? So there's all these ways of improving and eliminating waste within the process, and then reducing variation, which is going to get what you need and increase that throughput.
You said something that triggered a thought of another book reference. This is another of the books that I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of, Lead from Any Seat. But
I've not read that one, but it looks good.
yeah, I'll send you a copy. I got a couple. I'm a huge fan of this one. I can't find the chapter, but he has a little picture that says about the process and process mapping. What you think it is, what it
Yeah.
actually is, and what it should be. And then there are three totally different
Yep.
pictures, right?
Yeah. I have that slide somewhere in my training for sure.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's funny because like, these are lessons that just continue to teach and
Yep.
learn from. So it's such an interesting process. In somebody's career journey, what's like the point where they first get introduced to that opportunity to do that Kaizen leader training?
Really, it's really up to them. When they feel that they would like to learn it, there's no really any time limit. So, some people come in with knowledge already, right? So some people already come in with, engineering backgrounds or whatever, or business backgrounds, and they're like, hey, I would love to be part of the next workshops you have. So we take people on right away, or again, people over time. It typically, most people want to be involved once they've sat through a Kaizen event. Like,
How do they first get aware of it? Like, is it something that's on a training slide that somebody says, by the way, we offer this thing, and if you're interested, raise your hand? Or is it something that a manager would kind of tap them and say, hey, this quarter, I have an opportunity to send 3 people to Kaizen training, and I think you'd be great. Like, how does that actually work?
most people, they're introduced through actually being part of a team. So, like I said, we tend to take in, at a minimum of around 5 to 7 people of a cross-functional team, right, to solve a problem. Well, what we do is we like to have a few experts within the room, right, but we also want some newer sets of eyes. So within that, we bring them in and they get to experience someone facilitating. And whether
Okay.
that's operational excellence or another certified leader within Kaizen, and they're learning the methodology throughout because we do what's called a training Kaizen. We train and then do, train and do. So we may train on how to process map and then we do a process map and they're getting firsthand knowledge of how to actually do it. And they're like, this is really cool. I really understand. This makes sense. And most of it's common sense, right? But again, once they kind of get that flavor for it, they're like, this is a very powerful tool and I can see how this can help me. It usually only takes 1 or 2 and somebody's hooked and they want to typically they're like, "Hey, how can I get in your next workshop?" And I've had so many people ask me that. We've ran one fairly large workshop this year, and then we did another event where I had 2 or 3 people just in that one event say, "Hey, I would love to sign up to be a Kaizen leader in your next workshop." So,
Oh, that's cool.
again, we make it fun, and I think a lot of it, some of it's personality because some people are very outgoing and they love to, they're just really great in front of people, right? And they're great storytellers. Those are really good facilitators, right? You'd be surprised. There's some people that they come in and they're so quiet, they won't say anything. They don't even want to tell you their name. And by the end of it, they can sit there and explain the entire DMAIC process to you.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's just because you engage them the entire week. Like there's nobody that sits there and is not engaged. Somebody has a role within that process, and that's part of it. Is everybody it's in that room has a role in this event, and they participate. So they become part of that team and become comfortable. And again, we make it fun and play games and do like little things in between and take little quizzes and stuff, and then make it a little bit of a competition. And again, people love that stuff.
I think that's a great lesson in there too, that there are plenty of people that are extremely capable leaders that just haven't been tapped or asked to do something, like I'm a member of an HOA and we have this annual meeting and they're always looking for somebody to be the leadership of the HOA, and nobody wants to do it. And in my particular organization, there's this neighbor of mine that got nominated and come to find out she was, some amazing project manager. And you're just like, man, I've seen this person sit in this HOA meeting for many years. And, we finally kind of like twisted their arm to do this role and found out how amazing they were.
Yeah.
I think that's happening in all of our companies so much. There's so much. When I think about the waste, the traditional like 7 or 8 waste, underutilized talent is probably the one that I lose the most sleep over. There's just so much underused talent in the
Yeah.
world. But, and so it sounds like asking people for their ideas as part of daily management, or asking people for what's not working or what frustrates them, is a key part of that. The Kaizen events that you speak of, do you guys have like a specific cadence or frequency that you try to do at least one Kaizen every so often in every so many areas? How do you choose where to do Kaizen events?
So we do a couple different types of kaizens. We do daily kaizen, which is really PDCA or plan, do, check, act on the floor, right? We typically do that during if there's a deviation or some anomaly occurs out on the floor. We do those, but then we also do something when we start to identify trends through like tiers or, we're just missing a KP. And we're at that point, we start to deep dive and go into, we use a tool called an RCCM, which is a root cause countermeasure. What that does is identify what are those trends, what are the top losses, the reason, what's eating our lunch, right? What are the things that's keeping us from not hitting this metric? Sometimes the actions that come out of those are we need to perform a Kaizen event. We don't do Kaizen events just to do them. I know a lot of people do, a lot of companies do that just to kind of get the understanding out there. That's great and all, but they are very expensive to run, right? So you're taking people away, especially in an organization that doesn't have a lot of resources to just give people up off of the floor, right? Now, if you have that organization, that's great, and you could probably run hundred. I've seen companies run hundreds a year. We run them when they're needed, right? And again, we sometimes run them in if you can't take an entire 3 to 5 days at once, we'll break them up into pieces, right? An hour, couple hours here, couple hours there. They're much harder to run because you can lose traction or forget where you were at. I do like to do them all at one time because there's a lot of work, and again, you want to keep people engaged and not forget where they were at. But um, I'm a huge believer in them. Like I said, I don't target to try to do too many because anytime there's a Kaizen, there are actions,
Oh, yeah.
right? So the last thing you want is somebody with a stack of, actions that say, "Hey, we did 50 Kaizens, but I can't really fix any of it because I've got all these things to do and we have no time to fix them." Right? So
Yeah.
that's the last thing you want is to do. It's actually more hurtful to the culture of finding a way, finding the fix, finding that solution, and then never fixing it,
Yeah.
right? That's just, people are just like, what did we just wasted money. Why did we do this? Right. So what I like to do is at the end of that 3 days, the last 2 days is typically working on the event, right? So we get through the Kaizen teachings, right? And we actually solve the problem by day 3. And then on day 4 and 5, we work as a team together to work through the action plan and finalize everything in one room. At the end, you might have maybe 10% of your more longer term activities, but we try to make it to where actions typically, for the most part, are something that don't take longer than a week if possible, unless you're, writing documents that, have to go through multiple approvals or something, which obviously takes longer. But um, that's typically again, but we don't really target a certain amount. We just when they're needed, we do them. And again, a lot of the problems that are solved are really tackled at the tiers, and they're just do it's a lot of them, right? So
Have you guys maintained any sort of an idea funnel or project hopper or backlog of potential Kaizens?
absolutely. Yeah, we've got each site's probably got a minimum of between 50 to over 100 projects based off of their Hoshin plan from the strategy workshops that happen at the beginning of the year. Some of those will get completed and some won't, right? Some of those aren't necessarily Kaizen events. They may be, again, small workshops, process mapping sessions, again, identifying what those problems are in smaller bursts and then taking action on them. But some will turn into Kaizen, some won't. Some will be transformational projects that take 3, 4, 5 months to complete. But some can, be completed in a week's time.
Well, let me ask you this. If this was an opportunity to make a little commercial for anybody in your organization who was maybe a new employee and they were gonna join one of those Kaizens or be your next Kaizen leader, what would you say to them about, to encourage them to come get involved and to take on a Kaizen?
First off, come there with a true problem, right? That's the first thing we ask. If you want to be part of this, first tell me something you're trying to solve, right? If you don't know how to solve something, tell me what that problem is. We typically have them fill out a project charter and then we walk through it with them. And the first thing I do is if it is first off, if it doesn't make any sense, I say, okay, tell me what you're trying to solve. Right. That's the first. And everybody that's around me knows that I ask that question all the time. Tell me what you're really trying to solve because this doesn't make sense, right? And again, once you ask them that question, it just kind of sinks in. And they're like, okay, they slow down and then they start to walk through the process. But if you want to be, again, if you want to be that problem solver, come to me with your problem statement, and we'll walk through it together. And I'll teach you from beginning to end how the process works. And you'll have a lot of fun doing it and learning the process on the way.
Wonderful. So, Steve, this next section, I call this the rapid fire. Finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is.
Continuous improvement is a mindset, not a project.
Do you have a favorite go-to problem-solving tool or visual device from the toolbox? One that you kind of turn to regularly? You
Yeah,
could say my
I
favorite
love
tool.
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
So my favorite go-to continuous improvement tool is a Gemba walk. Go and see. You'll learn so much.
that's so true. You can see so much that you can't get by listening to people's feedback or complaints. Because it's just so good, so good. I love that. Is there a book that you recommend?
Yeah, there actually is. So, book that I would recommend. I've actually got a couple of them, but The Journey to Teams is a great one by Michael D. Reagan. That's a great one. And then again, measure what matters is another great one that you showed.
Excellent. Okay, do you have a favorite question or a couple of favorite questions that you find yourself using in your day-to-day?
Yeah, this is the one I just told you. My favorite question is, what problem are we really trying to solve?
Such a good
I
one.
ask this one all the time.
All the time. That question will help you avoid so much wasted time in circular conversations. That's such a good one. I love it.
Yeah.
Tell me something that you're excited about, fired up about.
I'm most fired up about is developing a learning organization of problem solvers. That's really it. In the end, that one touches my heart. If we get that army of problem solvers, I want to put myself out of a job. That is my job, right? Is to you no longer need me.
Have you been able to do that yet?
No, but I hope I can do it in the next 14 years because I'm retiring.
Along those lines, what's something that you will miss about your work if and when you do retire?
I love working with the people. It's always the people, right? It's nice to see the face of somebody that you were able to impact, right, and make a difference in.
I love that. So, what is the best way to communicate the impact of a continuous improvement project, a Kaizen project?
Yeah. So to communicate the continuous improvement impact. Tell the story behind the numbers. That's the most important piece. If you can tell a really good story and it makes sense with the data, people understand what you're trying to tell them.
It's a great lesson. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. We really appreciate your time and your experience. It's been a lot of fun catching up.
But thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun as well.
You bet. And for our listeners, if you'd like to suggest a guest, ask a question, give us any ideas for content or episodes, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Keith Norris on LinkedIn. I suppose, Steve, how could people connect with you if they wanted to locate you? Is LinkedIn the best also?
LinkedIn's absolutely the best way. Yeah, just ping me and definitely reach out.
Wonderful. This concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to add a comment. We really love comments on the channel. You can like or follow, subscribe on all the social platforms, and please share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.